Time now for Inside Utah Politics with Lindsay, Erin.
Well, welcome on into News for Utah Plus today. We are so glad you're finding us, whether it's on Amazon Fire, Roku, Apple TV, YouTube, the internets, all the places where you can find News for Utah Plus. We're grateful you're here. Joining me today, a couple of my political analysts to break down the hottest topics, both at the Utah State Legislature and the legislative session right now and across the country. Erin Ryder and Rusty Cannon. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi. It is good to be with you. Let me read those name titles for you. Your friendly neighborhood. What does that say? Ombuds?
That's good.
I just read that just now.
Ombudsman, right?
I was reading it as we were starting.
You
trying to
know,
figure out what
producer
did Peter
blooper.
put there?
I didn't think that one had saved out yet.
Oh, no, you didn't mean to write
It
that.
was still a turn. That was like when we were talking before the show about like what are we putting for everyone's name. I was like, that could be a
I
fun
wanted
one.
it to say.
I forgot.
That's
you
like
realized
what the
saying-
kids are saying. A cool abbreviation for ombudsman. It's
Yeah.
ombuds.
Sounds better.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly what the
Yeah.
kids are saying.
Well, the kids can't stop talking about ombudsman.
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah.
It's true. It should
At
say
least they're pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Erin Ride or Die Attorney is what it should say.
And get that one in
we
there
like
too.
that one. And then Rusty.
Yes.
Our trusty Rusty.
Peter, you come up with something good every week. I'm
Right?
gonna
Listen,
depend on you to
they pay
not
me to
break the
write.
streak.
I can do
I'm
3
gonna challenge
words.
you, Peter, to come up with better subtitles for me because I'm feeling gypped.
I've taken the challenge. Next time.
I like your friendly ombuds. It's pretty sweet. All right. Well, let's dive into the sesh, shall we? A legislative session happening as we speak on Utah's Capitol Hill. Want to get to a slate of bills that is causing some consternation, and those are dealing with the judiciary. This is kind of the second session in a row where the Utah legislature has sort of taken aim at the judiciary. We know they've been upset with some recent rulings, but just this week, the Utah State Bar came out with concerns about several bills, specifically the one that proposes a constitutional court, one that changes the threshold for judges to be retained, raises that threshold. Another one changes the Sentencing Commission, and that's just 3 of the like 6 or 7 that the bar is taking issue with. Rusty, let me start with you on this. Is the legislature going too far in any of their judicial bills? Obviously, we have the Supreme Court expansion and lower court expansion or resource bill that's already passed as well.
Well, that's a good question. I think you could make a case that they're stretching it a bit. I defer to Erin, our ombuds, also an attorney, to really get into the weeds on this. But this is most of this is a clear reaction to what's gone on in the last year or two, and I don't personally blame them for pushing back and trying to make some changes. Now, I think there's some context that's important. Every session, there is a lot of legislation, or a good amount, typically every session, having to do with the legal world, whether it's increasing penalties, decreasing penalties, changing all these kinds of things that I think are somewhat related to some of what you're talking about, but a lot of it is lumped in with, hey, we need to figure out this judiciary thing because in the opinion of the legislature, they're getting out of control. And I don't blame them for pushing back.
Yeah, Erin, so not just the redistricting case, obviously Republican lawmakers very concerned about that, but also an issue with Judge Torgerson and a sentence he handed down for someone who had child sex abuse material. The speaker in particular feels like that sentence was too lenient, and now he's changing the Sentencing Commission because of it. I'll ask the same question of you, though. Do any of these bills in your mind that target the judiciary go too far in the independence of the branch?
I think that the answer to this is yes and no, right? Kind of to Rusty's point, and I'll take the very classic attorney answer here of it depends.
It depends.
Yes, it depends. Thank you for knowing where I was going with that. The Utah Constitution gives the legislature the ability to make changes when it comes to the judiciary. So it is within the legislature's authority to make changes if they see changes that need to be made. And whether or not those changes are a good idea is a different question, but they do have the authority to do it. There are some bills that have come because of very legitimate concerns, caseloads and other things that are making a backlog, creating a backlog as we go through the court process and making it take a really long time for cases to be decided. That's something that is appropriate for the legislature to think about. Should we be expanding the court? Should we be creating additional courts to help with some of the backlog on this? Is some of it also pretty targeted at what's happened over the last couple of years? Yeah, for sure. No question.
Interesting. Anything sticking out to you, Rusty, in particular? Is there any bill that says to you, I don't like where they're going here? Or I think you mentioned earlier that you were fine with most of these proposals.
Well, I think one area where you could use the word hypocrisy is with the additional, members of the Utah Supreme Court. Yes, you can make a case 7 is better than 5. Those types of arguments, we haven't changed that in 100 years. However, this sounds oddly familiar to the debate in Washington D.C. about, expanding the U.S. Supreme Court and how those on the right were, quite freaking out about that, justifiably so. It's hard to make the argument this is different. So I think that's one area that I think is a little bit of a weak spot, but the governor's already signed it. It's already happening. So, we're going to live with it.
It's so interesting because the bar was really critical of that court expansion bill, even though it's already passed, it's already law. So we're all kind of like, well, what do you do now? I think the issue is the funding has not been appropriated yet, right? So that bill asks for $6.5 million for the judiciary to add those 2 justices, the 3 at the district level, and then all the staff that they want to add to the lower courts, $6.5 million to go to the judiciary. So there's kind of a question of, if they can't fund it, then what?
Yeah, they'll fund it.
They'll fund it.
They are going to fund it.
They'll find a way. That's for sure.
I do think it's interesting, though, the bill that would change the sentencing commission. One thing that can get complicated in the judiciary is that sometimes commissions like this can get relatively one-sided. I'm a corporate attorney by trade, and it's a pretty common point of discussion that a lot of judges don't come from a corporate background. So having an understanding of corporate law, when corporate law cases go through, that's why a lot of cases are actually tried in Delaware, and why a lot of companies incorporate in Delaware, because it is a more business law friendly state. And the same thing can be said in the criminal context. If you remove public defenders, if you remove the defense side from the conversation, it can shift the balance of how sentencing goes. Not to say that there shouldn't be changes to sentencing guidelines, but having a balanced perspective as you're making those decisions is actually pretty important.
Yeah, defense attorneys tend to believe in lighter sentences, would you say? Is that fair?
Or they just have a different perspective on it, right?
Yeah.
Because their job is to advocate for the people who are being tried.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see how that shakes out in conversations I've been in with the speaker. He seems open to, is it the right policy to get rid of all the defense attorneys, carte blanche. So we'll see if that bill stays the way it's proposed right now. I want to talk about another bill that's bubbling up. This one hasn't been assigned a committee yet, but it's a really notable question mark as to whether it's going to move forward. And this bill would require any state entity that takes over $1 million to $1 million in state funds to allow concealed carry on their premises. So you can think the Delta Center, you can think large construction companies, you can think presumably universities and schools. Rusty, how do you feel about this proposal? If a group is taking this much state money, should they be required to follow these concealed carry laws that Utah has?
Well, I think you could zoom out a little bit more and say, does an entity that takes government money need to be subject to the laws or rules of the government that abide by? I think that's a valid question. There have been a lot of complaints about the taxpayer money or the government money that's going towards downtown revitalization for sports. I think it's a valid question to say, hey, if you're getting that, maybe you should be subject to the rules and regulations that apply to those.
Well,
this is specific to guns, though, obviously, which is a whole different subject. As an example, with the Delta Center, it's my understanding it's an NBA rule that there are no guns in a place like that. So I don't know how it would work.
Rule.
Maybe Erin would know legally. Let's say we did pass this. Who wins?
Not my area.
Okay. All right. But it is a question as well as far as a gun rights perspective, and I think that's what the Representative Perucci is getting at, is having a conversation about, okay, if you have that right to a concealed carry, or even if it's permitless, where can you or can you not go? I think it's a valid question.
Well, I guess would the same theory then apply to things like our alcohol laws here? If the Downtown Revitalization Center takes state money, should they have to follow our alcohol laws, and what does that do for the businesses in that area?
Well, are they not going to follow the current alcohol
presumably
laws?
Things like you can't carry a beer walking around that center. If that's an Olympic hub, are we going to allow that? The temple is right close by, what? I mean, we're getting off topic, right? Because this one has to deal with guns, but I mean, the principle is sort of what I'm pushing you on a little bit.
Well, and to Rusty's point, Utah has changed its laws now. We're now a constitutional carry state. And so that's also different than being a state that requires even a concealed permit, right? And so there has been a shift over the last few years in being a little bit more flexible with carry laws anyway, and this could just simply be a reflection of that.
How do you think the business community might react to this? Does this say to them, we're pro-business, or you have to follow our rules, or does it not impact it?
Well, I think this is specific more to, at least my understanding, more to one place at this point, or maybe a couple, the Delta Center and some others. I think that's the gist of the bill. The question of should you be able to bring a concealed carry into a jazz game, or there's all these other places where you currently can't do that, like schools or universities. I'm spacing the other ones, but there's several places where that argument should be had, I think, about where you can carry, because where there has been issues with violence, it's been in some of those areas, and those areas you can't carry if you do want to defend yourself. So we're getting into the gun weeds here, but that's I think, and also a conversation that I think she's wanting to have.
Yeah.
I also think that it will not matter at all in terms of sales or people engaging with those businesses.
Yeah.
I have not even heard anyone talk about this bill outside of Capitol Hill. Like, I don't think it's going to really change much of anything in Utah.
We don't think that the Ryan Smiths of the world will push back. What if the NBA comes in and is like, hey,
well,
can't do this?
that may be a different conversation. And if the Ryan Smiths of the world want to push back, then why isn't he on Capitol Hill now having that conversation?
Good question.
Maybe he's behind the scenes.
Maybe.
That's how politics really works in Utah, Erin. You should know this.
I think
Yes.
just an update on the Ryan Smith specific angle. So the New York Times actually picked up this story last night.
So Erin needs to get with the times, because she said she hadn't seen it anywhere, and I'm like,
Nobody
what?
reads the
the
New
New
York
York
Times.
Times is not in Utah.
I know. I'm just this is just where I saw Smith's comment. I believe they basically just said, we will review any new policy that comes across our desk. And most of the people the Times reached out to thus far have been pretty tight-lipped about what the implications would be, and I can't find that the league has commented on it. So I think that does remain a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, we'll have to see if it even gets a committee. We don't know if it's...
Yeah, and that's when the conversation would start,
Right.
really, as it goes to committee and moves forward.
Yeah, and I always weigh the bills that come out as an idea that get numbered versus ones that land on a committee agenda, and how much coverage should they get and all of that.
Sometimes
So-
just numbering the bill gets the conversation started,
Right.
and that might be the only goal.
Right, exactly. Okay, let's dive into the redistricting issue. Again, it's my favorite topic to talk about here on IUP Plus, because it's just the case that never ends. It's now entering a federal court because a group of elected officials here in Utah have filed a federal challenge against Utah's congressional laws. Representative Malloy, Congressman Burgess Owens, and then 11 other local elected officials now charging in federal court that the U.S. Constitution provides that the state legislature draw the lines. And I have two Republicans on the show today, so I can presume the take you guys have on this. But I am curious, because the time, place, and manner clause of the federal election says the states get to decide how elections are run in its state. But that's not really what these folks are saying. Let me play this clip from Congresswoman Malloy.
But what we have right now is a map that was not created by the legislature or by the independent commission. And this is one of the remedies that we have that we've got to exercise to make sure that we're having a good process for drawing maps.
So she's taking issue with the fact that a judge put forward a map that was presumably drawn by the plaintiffs, never objected to by the parties in the case. And then this is the remedy for what the judge said is, violating Prop 4, which again, she ruled that the legislature did. Rusty, what do you make of this federal case?
Yeah, I think Representative Malloy is 100% right. I can see where they're coming from. This should come as no surprise to you, as you said, that I agree. But let me tell you why. So the U.S. Constitution does say that it's the legislatures that will draw the maps or do the districting, right? The Utah Constitution says the same thing. The problem is the ruling, how long ago was it now? A year and a half ago from the Utah Supreme Court. It's effectively creating these super laws or ballot initiatives that can't be touched, those types of things. It's those two things are colliding, where you have the literal wording of the Utah and U.S. Constitution are clear in my mind, but you have an interpretation by the Utah Supreme Court that kind of turned that on its head, saying, well, but if it's the right of the people to reform their government, in some cases that wins the day. I think the Utah Supreme Court was wrong in that decision in the way they're interpreting it. And so that's the battle back and forth here. And this is an avenue that Representative Malloy and Owens and the others that joined have now pushed this into the federal court to try to get a 3-judge panel to stay the map so that they can. That I think is a valid concern. I read the brief that they filed. Mm-hmm. It's well written. It makes a good point. It talks a lot about the harm that is being put upon candidates for these offices and the harm on Utah voters. I encourage people to actually read what they wrote.
Well, Erin, can you weigh in on what Rusty said here in terms of, does the U.S. Constitution say that the legislature shall redistrict, or that or that Utah will decide the time, place, and manner of elections? Is that different than the legislature drawing the districts?
Yeah, so Peter, I'm going to ask you to bring up the language here of the Constitution, if you can find it while we're doing
The
it.
federal or the state?
The federal.
Oh, I have it actually right here. One moment.
Perfect. Then bring it up, and then I will proceed with my comments here. The basic, the thing. Rusty is right in the sense that we have two things that are colliding, right? So you have the U.S. Constitution. Can we make that bigger?
So it says that the House of Representatives shall that's the wrong
not
section.
The language. Yeah, there's a section in here that does talk about the time, place, and manner.
The federal elections.
I'll
by
find
the
that one
legislature.
moment. Sorry, I thought we were talking about the congressional districting issue.
No, yeah.
One moment.
And if I understand the wording correctly, and I could pull it up here in a second if I should have had it already up, but the language says that it should be the legislature that does it. However, here's the thing that's interesting about this. Prop 4 left the door open for the legislature to still make the ultimate decision on what the map was.
Yes.
All it said was that the independent commission was going to suggest and recommend maps, and then from there, the legislature could choose any of the recommended maps.
Right.
At the end of the day, you can make the argument that that is still the legislature, that is still the state who is determining the map. They're just doing it based off the recommendation of the independent commission. So really, I think the case that Representative Malloy and others are bringing is about the judge choosing the map and not the legislature choosing the map. But this fight between who has the ultimate say between Prop 4 and the legislature, that is a fight that still needs to be fought. But it's a different fight than the judge chose a map, and because the judge chose a map, that is not constitutionally accurate.
Right. Okay, so the language of the Constitution says the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be presented in each state by the legislature thereof.
Yeah.
And then it
There you
goes
go.
on to say that Congress can make a law to.
And that is not, in their opinion, that is not what has happened.
Well, that is not what's
this
happened
map was
because the
chosen by a judge.
Yeah, because the judge chose it. But you can make the case that Prop 4 stayed within that guideline.
But okay, when I talked to Celeste Malloy yesterday, I asked her, what happens though if the legislature violates that proposition, even if we don't know yet if it's settled law?
Well, that's the battle.
Right. The legislature
Yeah.
here presumably violated, according to a lower court, Proposition 4. And so Celeste Malloy's answer was, well, they're supposed to just kick it back to the legislature, to which I also say, how many times does that happen until we get a remedy? Like, don't we have to have a judicial system? Like, isn't it their job to have a remedy to come in and say, this is the legal remedy for when the legislature violates the Constitution or the law?
Yeah, and there should be a remedy. I think the problem, and a lot of reasons that people are pushing back on Judge Gibson, especially the Republican Party in the legislature, is because there wasn't a set process for a remedy. She just, it was, okay, here are the maps that are presented.
Right,
and
but
then
I
she
still maintain
chose-
that the legislature did not object to that. Like, it was proposed for months in court filings that this was an option. And they never once said, hey, ding, ding, ding.
Well,
like,
and whether
we
or
can't
not
do this.
whether or not the legislature has made all the right arguments in this process and done all the right things, that is its own separate issue, and the answer to that is no.
Yeah, that's confusing to me, though.
There's been some fumbles
if they
along the way.
believed,
Probably thought that it was never going to be an issue.
but if they believed it was federally unconstitutional for a judge to pick this map, why did they not raise a red flag
Yeah.
on the remedy
You're right.
months ago?
You're right. They absolutely should have. So, but that doesn't change the fact that that's still the argument that's being made.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have this battle of how do you find the remedy if you have these two laws that the Utah Supreme Court is saying are equally important, meaning the legislature has its job, but also these independent initiatives have their job. How do you find the remedy is the portion that was never satisfied, that was never fully fleshed out in this whole process.
Right.
And that's why we're in this pickle, is because we never had that remedy. So Judge Gibson, in needing to proceed with a remedy, used the map that wasn't objected to, but that also wasn't actually approved by either of these two things.
Right.
Right. So anyway, it's complicated.
So if you're keeping up at home,
Hopefully you follow
if
that.
you're asleep
I'll just
at
summarize.
home.
The judge got it wrong.
Okay, there we go. But what happens here, Rusty? Like, do you think the Supreme Court will weigh in? Because they don't typically take up the U.S. Supreme Court redistricting issues unless they deal with like what state was it with the racial gerrymandering?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if the Utah Supreme Court acts in time. They're sort of under the gun and they need to get there. But this is the Malloy Owens lawsuit is asking for a three judge federal panel
Right.
to stay. So I think it's two different courts we're talking about.
We
here.
are, yeah.
And the likelihood, I never thought she'd throw out Map C, and I was fully wrong on that one.
Well, and I should have
so,
been clear.
don't know.
I meant the U.S. Supreme Court,
Oh,
because
US.
if this 3-court panel at the U.S. Supreme Court says, Utah, you have to halt this map,
Yeah,
then
or-
presumably the plaintiffs appeal, and then it gets kicked
Yeah,
to
that's
the
why
Supreme Court.
the solution they're asking for, I think, is a good one. You stay this map, you stick with the maps we have, run this all the way up the chain to the U.S. Supreme Court. Then we can finally answer this question once and for all. Otherwise,
Right.
this back and forth will never end.
Yeah.
So.
I guess that's sort of where I wonder if the U.S. Supreme Court will weigh in on any other state's redistricting issue.
I don't know.
Because they've sort of already said what happens. Like, states are allowed to do whatever states are going to do when it comes to elections, right? They can even gerrymander so long as they don't racially gerrymander. Is that accurate?
I mean, you can make the argument that all redistricting is some level of gerrymandering.
Yeah, that's the thing. The hypocrisy on this issue never ends. You go to the 2 states next door; it's completely gerrymandered the other way by the
Yeah.
other party.
You have to draw
And
the line
it's
somewhere.
there's no clear way to. We've gone around the horn on this enough times, but yeah, there's just no middle ground on this.
Well, at least we have a show to talk about it, right?
right.
It's not going to end for a while, and we will have more conversations about it.
We
Erin
call
Ryder-
that job security, folks.
We call that.
That's right.
Keeps me and
That's
Lindsay here at ABC4.
Keeps me employed. Appreciate that. Erin Ryder, our trusty Rusty.
That's right.
Thank you both for your insights
Thank you.
today. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. And as always, would invite you to watch Inside Utah Politics, which airs on Sundays at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. on ABC4 this week. Representative Matt McPherson will come break down his constitutional court proposal. We will also hear from USU President Brad Mortensen on the recent audit of Utah State University. So a juicy show, if I do say so myself. Guys, thoughts? Would you watch that show?
I would.
Yeah.
I want to know how you feel about that show.
That's right.
I just said I think it's juicy. Producer Peter, thanks for your fact checking as well and pulling up the Constitution for us. Clearly,
Thank
none
you,
of us
everybody.
have that memorized. And we will see you next time.